Ladies and gentlemen, we are back in the cave today. I want to get it more lit up in here and really start transforming it into more of a part of my base rather than just the creepy cave underneath it. You may notice that I turned my FOV down, and I'm going to let you guys know I won't be doing that again. Now, I know I'm not the best Minecraft player to begin with, but in parts of this video, it really looks like I'm trying to hit mobs with a trackpad. Anyways, that's enough yapping for today. Let's go ahead and get on with the first story. It's from r/nosleep from user no difficulty 5985. I guard a laboratory. I think they're up to something. I need a second opinion on this one. By now, I've worked as a guard at a number of different places. What that actually means is I have far too much time to read and write, and I've developed a bad habit of really overdoing it with the prose. This is different, and will have to be simple and fast. Hope that's okay. I recently got reassigned to a laboratory I cannot give the name of. Caught sleeping at the last place, whole thing, and I'm surprised I wasn't straight up fired because they caught me in the middle of one of my crazy dreams and apparently I was mumbling something about goblins. Anyway, at the laboratory, things work a bit different than anywhere else I've worked. 12-hour overnight shifts, me and one other guard. We take turns driving a golf cart aimlessly around the parking lot for 2 hours. I guess they want to look guarded. On the 2 hours off, they specifically want us to sleep. They want the guards to sleep. Never seen anything like it. Not in a bed or something like that, because why would it be? There's a desk at the receiving area in a corner. Scientists in white lab coats run past all night, speaking mostly various Asian languages. Other workers run past, speaking mostly Spanish. They really made sure I was monolingual before posting me here. Again, never seen anything like it. You'd think I'm supposed to keep an eye on all these scientists and workers, as a guard. Nope. The chair behind the desk is so much more comfortable than it looks, and for some reason, I'm always too tired when I get there. And yeah, I was specifically instructed to doze off. Yeah, they might be doing experiments on you, bro. So there I am, sound asleep, having all my crazy dreams while all these crazy scientists and workers run around. And if the dreams were crazy before, oh my, are they crazy now? Every dream has become the same. I'm on a bridge. Behind me, the bridge leads to a small forested island. In front of me is, I guess, the mainland. And there are all these humanoid shadows peeking out of the jungle, all trying to cross the bridge. But as long as I watch them, they won't. I call them humanoid shadows and not shadow people because they are very much not people, whatever they are. Something about the dream is always so inexpressibly bleak. Anyway, then they wake me up and send me out on the golf cart again so the other guard can take her nap. Getting paid to sleep is a great deal, so you can't blame me for doing what I'm told and not thinking too hard about it. And this all went quite well. Until one night, by sheer coincidence, listening to an audiobook while driving the stupid golf cart, I learned about the Spanish word duende. Apparently, it can refer to a lot of different, I suppose, elf-like creatures. Look it up if you want to. And I'm no expert, but for the purposes of this, whatever this is, I'll call them goblins. I say that because after driving the golf cart that night, I went back to the sleeping desk and could have sworn I kept hearing the workers say that word, duende. And I came back the next night, armed with an assortment of memorized words that are roughly equivalent to goblin in several Asian languages. I don't know any of these languages, and also I was wrong. A lot of them aren't even Asian, so what do I know, right? But I swear I keep hearing these words. I swear I don't know why, but all these crazy scientists and all these crazy workers seem to be talking on and on about goblins. Every night. Why? Are they just really into fantasy? And I hate this question, but does it have anything to do with the dreams? Because now, every time I have those dreams of myself on the bridge watching all the humanoid shadows coming out of the jungle, I keep catching myself calling them goblins. Why goblins? And I'm not stupid. I remember what they said that I was mumbling when they woke me up at that other post. And whatever these humanoid shadows are, I swear I keep seeing them out of the corner of my eye everywhere I go now. Sleep deprivation, right? My brain is getting delirious and my pattern recognition is going haywire, right? This laboratory doesn't give a shit about stupid fantasy goblins, right? But why would my brain make that up? It's so damn specific. In the dreams, The shadows, that bleakness. What do they have in this laboratory? Okay, so they gotta be doing some type of goblin related experiment at this place. Either that, or the security guard is a controlled group of people who don't know about an experiment that's happening to them. That's what it seems like, since it's necessary for them to sleep on the job. Anyways, if you guys have any notes on that one, put them down in the comments and I'll check them out. The next one's also from r/no sleep from user Gamal Frank. I'm a highway patrol officer. My eyes saw a tired family, but my dash cam saw rotting corpses smiling at me. I'm parked directly under the harsh, buzzing, fluorescent canopy of a 24-hour fuel station. I've locked all 4 doors. I have the engine running, the heater turned on high, and all interior lights illuminated. I'm surrounded by concrete and artificial light, and I still cannot stop my hands from shaking against the steering wheel. I am a county law enforcement officer. I've only been on the force for 2 years, but I've built a reputation for being strict, thorough, and completely reliant on protocol. I like rules. I like guidelines. In this line of work, the manual is your best tool. If you follow the steps, if you run the plates, if you approach the vehicle at the correct angle, you eliminate variables and maintain control of the situation. My assigned patrol sector is a massive, desolate stretch of 2-lane county highway. It's a lonely, isolated assignment. The road runs along the eastern perimeter of a massive, deep freshwater lake. The layout of the geography means there's absolutely nothing out there. On the left side of the highway, there's a steep, rocky embankment that drops directly down into the dark water of the lake. On the right side, there's an endless, dense expanse of thick pine forest. There are no houses, no streetlights, and no intersecting roads for over 40 miles. It's just a deep ribbon of dark asphalt trapped between the deep woods and the deep water. I work the graveyard shift. I patrol this highway from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Usually, the entire 8-hour shift consists of driving back and forth in complete silence, listening to the hum of my tires and the occasional crackle of the dispatch radio. Sometimes I pull over long-haul truckers who miss turns, or local teenagers driving too fast. It's a quiet, predictable job. Tonight started exactly like every other night. The weather was clear but very cold. A thick layer of fog was rolling off the surface of the lake, creeping over the embankment and drifting across the asphalt. I was cruising at about 40 miles per hour, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, scanning the dark road ahead with my headlights. At approximately 2:15 a.m., I saw a vehicle driving a few miles ahead of me. I sped up slightly to close the distance. It was a dark-colored minivan, an older model. It was traveling well under the speed limit, moving at maybe 30 miles per hour. As I got closer, I noticed 2 things. First, the passenger side taillight was completely burnt out. Second, the vehicle was swerving. It was not a violent, erratic swerve, but a slow, drifting weave. The tires drifted over the solid yellow line in the center of the road, corrected slowly, and then drifted back over the white shoulder line near the edge of the lake embankment. Protocol for this was clear. A burned-out taillight is a minor traffic violation, but combined with the swerving, it establishes reasonable suspicion for driving under the influence or extreme driver fatigue. I had to initiate a traffic stop. I pulled up behind the minivan, keeping a safe distance of 3 car lengths. I reached down to the center console and flipped the switch for my overhead emergency lights. The flashing red and blue strobes instantly illuminated the dark highway, reflecting off the thick pine trees on the right and cutting through the fog drifting off the lake on the left. The driver of the minivan reacted slowly. It took them nearly a quarter of a mile to register the lights in their rearview mirror. Eventually, the right turn signal blinked, and the van slowly pulled over onto the narrow gravel shoulder, coming to a stop just a few feet away from the steep drop-off into the water. I pulled my cruiser onto the shoulder behind them. I followed my training exactly. I offset my vehicle slightly to the left, creating a safety corridor between my cruiser and the flow of traffic. I angled my front wheels toward the road, so if a drunk driver rear-ended my cruiser, it would not be pushed forward into the minivan. I put the transmission in park, unbuckled my seatbelt, and grabbed my heavy metal flashlight. I stepped out into the cold night air. The only sounds were the low rumble of the 2 idling engines. the crunch of the gravel under my boots, and the faint rhythmic lapping of lake water hitting the rocks at the bottom of the embankment. I walked up to the rear of the minivan. I reached out with my left hand and firmly pressed my palm against the trunk lid. This is another standard protocol. You leave your fingerprints on the vehicle. If something happens to you, the investigators will have physical proof that you were standing right behind that specific car. The metal of the trunk felt unusually cold and damp. I walked up the driver's side, keeping my flashlight pointed low. I stopped just behind the driver's side window, angling my body so I was not an easy target if the driver decided to open the door aggressively. I tapped the glass with my flashlight. The window rolled down manually with a squeaking sound. I shined the beam of my flashlight into the interior of the van. It was a perfectly normal family. The driver was a middle-aged woman. She looked incredibly exhausted. Her hair was messy, and there were dark, heavy bags under her eyes. She squinted against the glare of my flashlight. Sitting in the passenger seat was a middle-aged man. He was wearing a plaid flannel shirt. His head was tilted back against the headrest, his eyes closed, lightly snoring. He looked completely relaxed. I moved the beam of the flashlight to the back seat. There were two young children, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They were both fast asleep, their heads leaning against the cold glass of the side windows. There was a pile of blankets and pillows shoved between them. It looked exactly like a family pushing through the final, exhausting hours of a long road trip. "Good evening, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. "I'm stopping you tonight because your passenger side taillight is completely out, and I noticed you were having some trouble maintaining your lane." The woman rubbed her face with a tired hand. "I am so sorry, officer," she said. Her voice was quiet and hoarse. "We've been driving for a very long time. We just wanted to get there before morning. I guess I'm more tired than I realized." "It happens," I replied, "but driving exhausted on this stretch of highway is dangerous, especially this close to the water. I need to see your license, registration, and proof of insurance, please." She nodded slowly. She reached across the sleeping man in the passenger seat, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out a small stack of papers. She handed them to me along with a plastic driver's license. When her fingers brushed against mine, her skin felt freezing cold. It felt like touching a piece of ice. "I'm going to take these back to my cruiser and run your information," I told her. "I'll be right back. Please remain in the vehicle." She didn't say anything. She just gave me a slow, tired nod and looked straight ahead through the windshield. I turned around and walked back to my cruiser. I climbed into the driver's seat, pulled the heavy door shut, and placed the license and registration on the center console. I turned on the overhead dome light so I could read the small print. I picked up my radio microphone. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I'm initiating a traffic stop on a dark-colored minivan. Requesting a plate check." The radio crackled. The dispatcher on duty tonight was an older woman who usually worked the quiet shifts. "Copy that, Unit 4. Go ahead with the plate number." I read the alphanumeric sequence off the registration paper. "Copy," she replied. "Stand by. The system is running a little slow tonight." I put the microphone down. I settled back into the seat, enjoying the warm air blowing from the heater vents. The heavy protocol of the stop was complete. Now, I just had to wait for the computer system to verify the documents, write a simple warning ticket for the broken taillight, and advise the tired mother to pull over and rest. While I waited, I glanced down at my center console. Mounted directly below the radio is a small, heavy-duty monitor. It displays the live video feed from the cruiser's dashboard camera. The camera records continuously during a traffic stop, capturing everything that happens directly in front of my vehicle. The video is strictly black and white, designed to capture high-contrast details like license plates in low-light conditions. Out of pure ingrained habit, I looked at the monitor to ensure the camera was recording the minivan. I stopped breathing. The image displayed on the small screen was wrong. It was entirely, fundamentally wrong. I looked at the screen and my brain struggled to process the visual information. The camera was pointed directly at the space in front of my cruiser. The red and blue strobe lights were flashing across the scene in alternating waves of bright white and deep black. The vehicle on the monitor was not the minivan I had just walked away from. The van on the screen was crushed. The roof was caved in entirely, bending the metal frame down toward the seats. The rear bumper was twisted and hanging off by a single rusted bolt. The exterior was completely covered in thick, dark, hanging layers of aquatic algae and river weeds. The tires were flat, rotting, and half buried in thick mud. It looked exactly like a vehicle that had been pulled from the bottom of a lake after decades underwater. But that was not the part that made my blood turn to ice. The dashboard camera was positioned directly behind the rusted, crushed rear window of the van. The glass was shattered. Looking out through the broken back window, staring directly into the lens of the dashboard camera, were 4 faces. They were bloated, skeletal. The flesh on their faces was gray, peeling away from the bone in wet, ragged strips. Their eye sockets were empty, dark, hollow pits filled with stagnant water. They were pressed tightly together in the back of the crushed vehicle. The mother, the father, the 2 children. They were all looking directly at the camera, and they were smiling. It wasn't a natural expression. Their jawbones were pulling back, stretching the rotting, waterlogged skin into wide, unnatural, gaping grins. They were completely motionless, suspended in the grainy black and white feed, just staring and smiling at the lens. A wave of suffocating panic slammed into my chest. My hands gripped the edges of the monitor so hard my knuckles turned white. I thought the camera system was malfunctioning. I tore my eyes away from the screen and looked up through my windshield. Parked 20 feet in front of me was the pristine, dark-colored minivan. The metal was clean. The roof was perfectly intact. The red glow of the functional brake light illuminated the gravel shoulder. Through the back window, I could see the silhouette of the 2 children sleeping peacefully under their blankets. I could see the mother looking into her side mirror, watching my cruiser. Everything was perfectly normal. I looked back down at the monitor. The crushed, rusted, algae-covered wreckage was still there. The 4 rotting, skeletal corpses were still there. They had moved. The mother had raised her hand. A skeletal, bloated arm, covered in peeling wet skin and thick green weeds, was pressed against the shattered glass of the rear window. She was tapping on the glass from the inside. I could not hear the tapping through the heavy doors of my cruiser, but I could see the bone of her finger hitting the lens on the screen. Tap. They were still smiling that wide, gaping, impossible grin. I felt dizzy. I reached forward with a shaking hand and physically hit the side of the monitor, hoping to reset the feed. The screen flickered, but the image remained. The bloated corpses continued to stare. Suddenly, the radio crackled loudly, breaking the heavy silence in the cruiser. "Unit 4, this is dispatch," the elder woman's voice said. She sounded deeply confused. Her professional tone had completely slipped. I grabbed the microphone, fumbling with the cord. "Unit 4, go ahead." I ran the plates and the license, she said slowly. "Are you absolutely sure you read that sequence correctly? Are you sure you're looking at a dark minivan?" "Yes." I stammered, my eyes darting between the pristine van out the windshield and the nightmare on the screen. "I'm parked right behind it. Why?" "The system flagged the registration," the dispatcher said. "Those plates belong to a vehicle that was involved in a major missing persons case 30 years ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Missing? A family of 4? She read from her screen. "They were driving cross-country. They were last seen at a gas station near your current location. The police searched for weeks. The primary theory was that the driver fell asleep at the wheel and the vehicle went off the embankment into the lake. They never found the car. They never found the bodies. The license you gave belongs to the mother. Her status is listed as legally dead." The radio went silent. I sat completely frozen in the driver's seat. The heater was blowing hot air onto my face, but I was shivering uncontrollably. I slowly raised my head and looked through the windshield. The pristine minivan was gone. It had not driven away. I had not heard the engine start. I hadn't heard the tires crunching on the gravel. The red brake light was simply gone. The space in front of my cruiser was completely empty. I reached up and engaged the mechanical lever for the high-powered spotlight mounted on the driver's side pillar. I twisted the handle, aiming the bright beam of light directly at the patch of gravel where the van had been parked seconds ago. And there were no tire tracks. Instead, covering the gravel shoulder was a massive puddle of thick, black, stagnant water. The water was actively bubbling, seeping quickly into the dirt. A horrible, foul smell began to enter the air vents of my cruiser. It smelled like dead fish, rotting wood, and ancient, stagnant mud. I looked down at the dashboard monitor. The screen was displaying a live feed of the empty gravel shoulder in the puddle of water. The crushed van was gone. The corpses were gone. I dropped the radio microphone onto the passenger seat. I could barely grab the gear shift. I needed to put the cruiser in drive. I needed to turn around and drive away from the lakes as fast as the engine would allow. Protocol didn't matter anymore. I just needed to leave. I grabbed the gear shift and pulled it down into drive. Before my foot could touch the accelerator, the entire patrol cruiser violently lurched. It was a massive, concussive impact that originated from the right side of the vehicle. The heavy metal frame of the Ford Explorer groaned under the sudden stress. My head snapped to the right, hitting the headrest. The cruiser was moving. It was being dragged sideways. Something was pulling the 2-ton police vehicle across the gravel shoulder, dragging it directly toward the steep embankment that dropped into the black water of the lake. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. The powerful engine roared, the RPM needle jumping into the red. The rear tires spun frantically, kicking up a massive cloud of gravel, dirt, and mud. The tires screamed, trying to find traction on the loose shoulder, but the sideways momentum was too strong. We were sliding toward the edge. I turned my head and looked out the passenger side window. The lake was churning. The dark, flat surface of the water was boiling, sending thick white foam crashing against the rocks. Rising out of the freezing black water were 4 figures. It was the family. The mother, the father, the 2 children. But they weren't human anymore. They were the bloated, skeletal, rotting corpses from the camera monitor. Their flesh was gray and peeling. Their empty eye sockets stared blankly at my cruiser. Their jaws were unhinged, locked into that wide, horrific grin. They were suspended in the air. Attached to the back of each rotting corpse was a massive, thick, muscular appendage. They looked like dark, wet, glistening tentacles, thicker than tree trunks, emerging from the deep water of the lake. The tentacles were fused directly into the spines of the corpses, using the dead human bodies like fleshy, rotting puppets. The tentacles extended from the lake, reaching up the rocky embankment. The rotting puppet corpses of the family were pressed directly against the side of my cruiser. Their bloated skeletal hands were gripping the window frames, the door handles, and the wheel wells. The strength of the appendages was impossible. They were dragging the heavy police cruiser sideways through the deep gravel, inch by agonizing inch, pulling me closer to the drop-off. The smell of the stagnant water and the rotting flesh was overwhelming, filling the cabin of the cruiser. The metal doors buckled inward under the crushing pressure of the tentacles. The passenger side window shattered, spraying tiny cubes of safety glass across the front seat. One of the bloated, rotting arms reached through the broken window. The skeletal fingers, dripping with thick lake mud, grabbed the fabric of my passenger seat, pulling the cruiser harder toward the cliff. The rear tires of my cruiser slipped over the edge of the embankment. The back of the vehicle dropped violently, the undercarriage slamming against the sharp rocks. My stomach dropped. I was angled upward, staring at the night sky. The black water of the lake was churning wildly just a few feet below my rear bumper. I had exactly 1 second before the center of gravity shifted completely and the cruiser tumbled backwards into the deep water. I grabbed the steering wheel with both hands, locked my elbows, and slammed my heavy police boot completely down on the accelerator pedal. The engine screamed, pushing maximum torque to the all-wheel drive system. The front tires, still gripping the solid asphalt of the highway lane, bit down hard. The rubber burned against the road, filling the air with thick white smoke. For a terrifying, agonizing second, the cruiser held completely stationary, suspended in a brutal tug-of-war between the horsepower of the engine and the crushing strength of the tentacles in the lake. The metal frame groaned. The engine whined. Then, the front tires caught traction. The cruiser violently jerked forward. The sudden explosive forward momentum ripped the vehicle out of the grip of the rotting corpses. I heard a wet, sickening tearing sound as the skeletal hands gripping the window frame were physically ripped away from the tentacles. The cruiser launched forward, climbing over the edge of the embankment and slamming hard onto the flat asphalt of the highway. The rear tires caught on the road, propelling the vehicle forward like a missile. I did not let off the gas pedal. I kept my foot floored. I looked in the rearview mirror. The massive wet tentacles were writhing on the gravel shoulder, aggressively slapping the ground where the cruiser had just been. The rotting bodies of the family dangled limply from the ends of the appendages. As I sped away, the thing slowly pulled the tentacles back down the embankment, dragging the skeletal puppets back beneath the black, churning surface of the lake, disappearing without a splash. I drove at over 110 miles per hour down the county highway. I didn't turn on my sirens. I didn't radio dispatch to tell them what happened. I just drove, staring straight ahead, gripping the wheel until my hands went numb. I didn't stop until I saw the bright artificial canopy of this fuel station. I pulled under the lights and threw the cruiser into park. I've been sitting here ever since. I've checked the passenger side of my vehicle. The window is completely shattered. The heavy metal doors are deeply dented, crushed inward by a massive circular pressure. Sitting on the passenger seat, resting amidst the broken glass, are 3 severed, skeletal fingers, completely coated in thick, foul-smelling lake mud. I'm not going back to the station. I'm leaving the keys in the ignition, and I'm walking away from this job. I don't care about the rules anymore. I'm writing this on my phone and posting it here as a direct warning to anyone driving alone at night. If you're traveling down a desolate highway near a large body of deep water, and you see a vehicle driving slowly, drifting over the lines, trying to get your attention, do not stop. Do not pull over to help them. Okay, yeah, no, I won't. You sold me on that. The next time I see someone swerving, I'm just gonna, you know what? I'll slow down. I won't even call to report a drunk driver or anything. I'm good. I'm just gonna not get involved. All jokes aside, that was a very creepy and very good story. This guy was lucky to escape with his life. I don't know if I would like quit the job over it, but yeah, no, that is a terrifying situation to be in. Not that I can say I've been in it before. Anyways, let me know what you thought of that one in the comments. I'm gonna get on with the next story. The next one today is from r/scary stories from Trash Tia. My mom and dad have decided to starve us. I'm starving when I sit down for breakfast. Isabel, is that you, honey? Mom's voice sends me into panic mode. Mom pokes her head through the door, willowy blonde hair framing her face, and her usual heart-shaped apron. Sweetie, you forgot to clean the dishes last night, she said, wafting what looks like flour from her hands. I had to do them. Sorry, Mom, I managed to get out, ducking my head. Did this mean what I thought it meant? Panic twisted my empty gut, creeping up my spine. The last time we didn't do our assigned chores, the 3 of us went without dinner for 3 days. I still felt the phantom emptiness of my stomach that particular night. Mom and Dad ate dinner downstairs, the 3 of us locked in our rooms. For 3 nights straight, I ended up watching videos of food, my mouth watering, choking on my own drool. The smell came from downstairs, had almost driven me mad. I cried myself to sleep, starving, my stomach and mind follow. I was careful with my words. I had homework, so I switched with, I don't care, Isabel. Something ice cold slithered down my spine, like a spider's leg tracing the curve of it. The smell of food was already suffocating me, and her tone was far too chipper for this early in the morning. The rota is there for a reason, Isabel. If you have any problems with cleaning duties, you should come to me. Right, I muttered, my hands clammy. Just in time for Luke to announce his appearance with an exaggerated yawn, diving into the seat opposite of me. He smells of BO, and his attempt to hide it with my raspberry-scented shampoo. I can already sense his dwindling excitement. Ever since we were little kids, we had a sort of connection. When Mom and Dad started starving us, it only strengthened. I keep my head down, silently motioning for Luke to copy. We're so sorry, Mom. I expect silence, but this morning, my brother is even more annoying. As usual, Lucas St. Clair fails to read the room. Wait, what are we sorry for? Luke asked loudly. Instead of responding, I kicked him under the table, hard. Ow, Luke hisses, kicking me back. He leaned over the table, scowling. What was that for, gremlin? I kicked him again, and that seemed to shut him up. He recoiled in his seat, as if those 3 days of not eating had come back to haunt him. Luke never talked about it, but I knew he was deeply affected. He was the optimistic one, the sibling who smiled instead of crying. But after 3 full days of starving, he'd almost become a puppet of himself. He still smiled, still laughed, still pretended he was okay, but every so often I'd catch him staring into oblivion, eyes glistening, fists clenched, like he was going to finally shatter apart. I kept waiting for it, anticipating my brother to just fly off the handle one day. When we were least expecting it, his strings coming loose, but he didn't. When Luke didn't answer, I risked a glance up. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes, once bright, at least trying, were familiarly hollow, fixed on our mother as she made breakfast. "Good morning, Lucas," Mom sang from the kitchen. "Did you sleep well?" Luke didn't respond for a moment, his lip curling. "Yeah," he said, fashioning a smile. Luke shot me a look, and I copied. Mom liked it when we smiled, our best smiles. "Yeah, I had a great sleep, Mom." "Morning." Lula, our sister, dragged herself to the table, greeting us with a sleepy smile. Lula's smile splintered when she noticed Luke's eyes. Our sister slowly took her seat, pushing blonde curls out of her eyes. "What did you two do?" she hissed, kicking Luke under the table. He winced, but uncharacteristically didn't kick back. "Luke didn't do the dishes," I grumbled. Her eyes widened. "What?" "It wasn't my fault," Luke shot back. "I was out with Dad." He glared at me. "It was Gremlin's turn. She's the one who didn't do them. I need him again, hard enough to draw a groan. We made a pact. If I cleaned your room, you promised to do the dishes." He sat back, arms folded. "And?" "Breakfast is ready." Mom's voice shattered the silence between us. She swept in, carrying bowls of cereal and plates stacked with pancakes, fruit, pastries, and glasses of orange juice. The smell slammed into me, sour and rotting, clawing its way up my nose. Wrong. Across from me, Luke was sickly pale, his eyes fixed on his plate as Mom piled it high with crepes. She beamed, filling my bowl, cereal spilling over the rim. I picked up my spoon, hands trembling. "Eat up." Mom laughed, nudging Luke. He took a bite, and his eyes squeezed shut, and gagged into his hand. Lula shoveled cereal into her mouth, smiling too brightly. "It's great, Mom," she squeaked. "Thanks." I stared down at my endless bowl of Choco Pops. "What about you, Mom?" Mom drifted to the fridge and opened it, pulling out her breakfast. A woman's severed head, entrails spilling across the plate. The stench seeped into my nose. My mouth watered, a growl rumbling under my tongue. Luke flinched, his head snapped up, fangs appearing in a grimace, eyes flashing. The woman was his kill from last night. He ducked his head, snarling. "You've got to be kidding me. She's mine." Mom gnawed into the skull, stringy pieces of brain stuck between her teeth. "Eat your breakfast, please," she ordered us. Luke tore into his pancakes, trying to suppress his sobs. Lula scooped cereal into her mouth, quietly gagging. Human food was torture to us. Mom's smile widened as she chewed. "Remember to clean the dishes next time, darlings." All right, yep. That one caught me off guard. I was wondering where they were going with that. Okay. You know what? Let's just move on to the next one. The next story today is from r/no sleep, from user Let's Split Up. I bought talking buttons for my cat, but the cat wasn't the only one who used them. It's actually my youngest son's cat who learned to use the buttons. I inherited the cat after my son lost control of his car on the icy roads last winter. It happened on the day he received a scholarship to his top college choice. He and his boyfriend were feeling on top of the world and were on their way back home from a trip. His boyfriend survived, but he did not. You can imagine the grief. Either you have experienced the loss of a child or you haven't. I didn't weep, not at the funeral nor many weeks after. I became a stone, an object. It was as if all the sorrow were locked far from reach. Instead of feeling anything, I simply thought many times of retrieving the pistol that I owned from its case in the back of my closet. And on a few occasions, I even went and took it and sat with it, feeling its weight in my hand. My son Vinny to his friends, was my world. One day he would have been famous, I'm sure of it. You may think that this is a father's pride talking. Maybe it is, but he had a music scholarship. He would have performed for presidents and world leaders. In my mind, when I see him, it's usually at his piano, playing for his cat. When he was 15, I promised him a kitten if he did well in school, and he picked out this tabby, the tiniest and angriest tabby in the world, and named her Terry. She loved only him, and hissed and growled at anyone else who came near, including me. She also peed on his clothes, and on mine, and on my bed. To say I wanted to get rid of Terrible Terry, as I called her, is an understatement. But then my brilliant son died, and suddenly it was just me and Terrible Terry and the gun. I felt nothing but resentment toward the cat, but she spent hours and hours slouched on the windowsill in his bedroom, where she always sat when he played piano. I used to think she sat there to watch the birds, and couldn't care less about his playing. Now, she didn't even lift her head. She just loafed on the sill, as if waiting for him to come bursting in and pull the dust cover off and play. And there were the buttons. You've seen them, I'm sure. Those gimmicky buttons that people get to train animals to talk. Bunch of nonsense if you ask me. What has a dog got to say? Nothing but food, probably. And anyway, people are supposed to give commands to dogs, not the other way around. But Vinny would watch all these videos of dogs and sometimes cats pressing the buttons, even though, to be honest, the cat videos she showed me looked like the cats walking onto the buttons completely by accident. And that's what I told him. Complete waste of money. People wishfully projecting their ideas onto their pets. The cat pressed "love you" and meant it? Ha! Cats only know hunger and selfish desires. Well, my stubborn, dreamy-eyed, cat-loving son bought a set of those buttons. He pre-recorded dozens of them, but began with just a handful. Food, cuddle, outside, music, dad, and Venny. Yes, he put me and himself as buttons, and music too, because he was convinced in his silly teenaged way that the cat liked music, and might want to request it. Terry was terrified of those buttons. No matter how he tried to train her, she refused to use them. She hissed, she swatted, she wouldn't go near them. She knew exactly what they were for, I'm sure of it. She even knew the words because he'd say to her, "Let's have some music," and she would go to her perch by the piano and wait for him. But when it came to the buttons, she refused. Terry loved those buttons, about as much as I loved Terry. But then, like I said, came the accident. Suddenly, my son was gone. The house felt wrong, empty. Terry was a husk. I put food out, but she didn't eat. I didn't know how to read her signals. She hissed at me if I came near. I decided I should get rid of her. I couldn't keep this cat. The cat hated me anyway. I will get rid of her, I thought, and then I will be done with me too. But I couldn't get myself to get rid of my son's cat, and I couldn't end myself while the cat was still alive, and so we were stuck, me and the cat. And then one night, I was up in my room contemplating the gun when I heard the recorded voice, downstairs, speak. Vinny. I assumed it must be a mistake. She must have walked over the button, but then it came again. Vinny, Vinny, Vinny. I stood there, listening to that cat press Vinny over and over, and tears came into my eyes. It was like a key turning in a lock, a crack in the dam that then finally burst. I gasped, loud, gulping sobs. Finally, the tears came for my son, and when the flood was over, I came down and found tiny Terry sitting by the buttons, looking miserable, and I scooped her up and told her, I miss him too. And for once, she didn't swat me. She gave only the smallest growl. I put her down and got her some food. Got myself some too. We both ate. That was the beginning. Since then, I've added more buttons. You see, I'm not an animal person. I didn't understand Terry's body language, her wants and needs, without the button. She finally started using them, training me. I guess they say cats do that. She has a wet food button, a kibble button. She has no button to use if I show her the wrong food. I also added from my son's collection the love you button. Yes, I confess, I did add it, and a Terry button. And I began to make a habit of pressing, love you, Vinny, and love you, Terry. I was genuinely in shock how much she communicated. The first time she pressed, Dad, love you, I almost broke down all over. I couldn't believe it. She looked like she wasn't even trying. She just casually walked over the buttons, but it was deliberate. It happened more than once. I still hadn't learned to read her cat body language at all, but with the buttons, I understood her, and I felt like I had part of my son with me. Sometimes she said things that just cracked open my soul. Like when she looked at me with those big round eyes one time and hit Vinny home. I wish he was home too, I told her. It was uncanny, the things we could discuss. We'd have entire conversations. I know it sounds nuts. I'd have thought myself nuts just a couple months before, but I added buttons so fast, and she took to all of them. I asked her once if she understood what happened to Vinny. She replied with, Vinny bye-bye. I'd added the bye-bye button to tell her whenever I was leaving the house. Then she asked me, Vinny home? I had to tell her no, Vinny bye-bye, and she stubbornly insisted again, Vinny home. And she walked away angry, I think, that I couldn't make Vinny come back. But the reason I'm sharing this story, and sharing this story here, is because of what happened last week. Last week, my son Liam came to see me. Liam is Vin's older half-brother. He's nearly a decade older than Vin from a previous relationship, and unfortunately, Liam inherited all his mother's worst traits. It's always the same with him. He begs for money, gets abusive if I don't give it, and disappears once I've made him a loan he'll never repay. I cut off all funds to him a few years ago and told him I would no longer enable his habits. While I'd never cut him entirely out of my life, I hadn't allowed him to visit when Vinny was alive because of the way he'd treated Vinny on a previous visit. When he'd sneeringly accused me of favoring that mincing little, I won't repeat his hateful words, for his younger brother. When he showed up on my doorstep, he had the smell of whiskey on his breath, and he looked wild-eyed and anxious. Dad, he said, and then hugged me tight. I'm sorry about Vin. It shocked me so much. I hugged him right back, and he came in and sat down and asked how I was doing. He was surprisingly solicitous. I didn't understand why. His usual meanness didn't come through until he noticed a growling Terry. You still have that little piss queen? He asked, and reached a hand for her, only for her to swat and run away. Little shit, he said. Her name is Terry, I said defensively. He laughed. Didn't you used to call her Terrible Terry? She doesn't pee on things anymore. From the button area came presses of bye-bye. She wants you to go bye-bye, I said. She can screw off. She's not your son. I am. Bye-bye. I didn't like the way he talked to the cat, though a few minutes later, after she peed on his shoes, I found his anger more understandable. And I locked her up to prevent him from harming her. But he seemed genuinely sad about Vinny, and even asked about Vinny's boyfriend and his recovery after the crash. I wondered if he had come over to try to patch things up between us. Maybe to start off on better footing, like me and Terry had. Until he asked me what was going to happen to Vinny's college fund. I haven't decided yet, I told him. I'm still processing all of this. But he's not going to use it, right? I mean, even before the accident, the money you'd been saving for him, he had a scholarship, right? He wasn't going to need it, and he definitely won't need it now. Dad, I could use a loan. Liam. You still have one son left, Dad, he burst. And there was the old rage. Why do you always treat me like this? Even when he's dead, he still deserves more than I do? I bet you cut me out of your will, too, huh? I didn't. You didn't? No, you both get equal shares. Oh, okay. He calmed down. Sorry, I have a lot of resentment, I guess. I'm sorry. But about the loan, is there any way? I'll have to think on it. Oh, okay. You think. I'll make us drinks, okay? I should have known what was happening when he went into the kitchen and was fumbling around longer than necessary. I should have known, but how could I? I had already lost one son. How could I suspect the other? How could I imagine the worst? I wanted to believe things would be better. I drank the alcohol he put in front of me without thinking. I assumed the wooziness was just the booze. It had been so long since I'd had a real drink. Somewhere in the bedroom, where she was locked up, Terry was howling her little heart out. I never heard her make those sounds, and said I was going to let her out, but when I got up, the whole world lurched. Liam's arms caught me, and he said, Gotcha, Dad, and then kept whispering in my ear, his breath still reeking. Sorry, but you're making me do this. If you just give me that freaking loan. I didn't start to panic, really panic, until he propped me up on the sofa and went upstairs with the question, "You still keep your gun in the closet?" The fear hit me in a wave then. I felt like I was floating, like I was drifting away from my body, like I was lost in some strange and horrible dream. I tried to stand, to stumble to the table and grab my phone, but I fell and heard the crack of my head against the table's edge. The ground came up to meet me. Pain shot through my skull. Footsteps thudded overhead, cursing as he rifled through my closet. I tried to pull myself up again, finally managed to grab my phone. The screen swam in my vision. My fingers were fat and clumsy as I tried to push the keys to call for help. A hand smacked the phone out of my grip. "It's 'cause you won't help me," Liam rambled as he again wrapped his arms around me to try to get me onto the sofa. "Everyone knows you're depressed, suicidal, can't handle Vinny's death. You should have just done it, man. If you just done it, I wouldn't have to." I gasped. "This is the only way. This is how it was going to be anyways. You don't even want to live anyway. In your own way, you're helping me out here in the end," he said. And then, in response to the howling from the other room, he suddenly shrieked. The howling stopped. Liam glared toward the door, his breaths coming hard and fast. Then looked back at me. Everything had become so blurry. His words were a garble, his features a haze. I felt the cold muzzle of the gun against my temple as my heart galloped in my chest. From Vinny's room came a sharp rustle, like a curtain or a sheet. And then the piano, the notes of a piano. "The hell?" Liam's voice slurred through my drugged haze. "Is someone here?" The playing continued, unsteady but beautiful, unmistakably Claire de Lune, just like Vinny had always played, but slower, halting. And I wondered, it couldn't be the cat, could it? It almost sounded like the cat walking deliberately across the keys, the same way she walked across the buttons, but that would have been impossible. "Who's there?" snarled Liam. He snatched up the gun and stalked toward the bedroom door. In my blurry vision, he wavered back and forth, and when he opened the door, there at the piano was a figure, flickering and impossible. A figure that both was and was not there. And Liam screamed and raised his arm, and the world exploded as the gun went off. And then there was the yowling of the cat, and the cat came charging out, all bristling like a tiger. And with her, that same figure from the piano. And Liam was screaming in terror and fired the gun again and ran out the door. What I remember next is waking in the ER. Neighbors apparently called police after hearing the gunshots. When I was discharged and returned home, my head wrapped from the concussion. I was relieved to find Terry whole and unarmed. She hurried over to greet me, tail up. I'd finally started picking up her body language to know a greeting when I saw it. But it wasn't just the tabby greeting me, I knew. You see, I'd finally realized something. A cat can't play a piano. And this cat couldn't use buttons, not of her own volition. Maybe it hadn't been Terry talking to me all along. Maybe it was, and always had been Vinny. And so, as I extended my hand and Terry rubbed my knuckles, I told her, "I love you. I won't ever hurt myself. I promise I will survive. You can be free." Terry rubbed my hand again, and rubbed my face when I bent my head to hers. Then she padded over to the buttons and walked across them. I listened to my son's recorded voice. "Love you. Bye-bye." Terry hasn't touched those buttons since, but every once in a while, when I'm very deep in dreams, I think I hear the sound of the piano. That was such a good story. It was freaky. I wouldn't so much as say it was very scary, but definitely freaky. Anyways, that's all the scary Reddit stories in Minecraft I had for you today. If you liked today's video, drop a like and subscribe. If you didn't, I don't know what to tell you. Thanks for watching.